Welcome to all who are here in Chit Chat Auditorium today, as well as to our YouTube viewers. Today's topic is on the subject of reconciliation. Now, this is quite an appropriate theme when you think about here in the US, we just celebrated Thanksgiving, and the many families and groups of friends that gathered together and spent time together. When we think about reconciliation, immediate thoughts might be related to a recognition around reconciling with loved ones who we may have pushed away over the years. And certainly when it comes to recovery, that can be a very genuine goal. However, another major part of the theme of reconciliation is that of recognizing our need to reconcile with ourselves. When a person gets caught in the cycle of addiction or substance use disorder, over time, they start pulling away from who they are. It may start small, but over time, we may start crossing boundaries that we have set for ourselves until we begin to pull away from the very values that we have held onto as an important part of our identity and discover that we don't even know who we are anymore. And as we don't know who we are, so others don't recognize us anymore. And so the cycle of estrangement and alienation with ourselves and others, and what may have been a major source of hope, begins. Now, I think it's been since the pandemic that I've gotten into this guilty pleasure of binge watching shows. Anyone else like binge watching shows? Yep. I'm not alone. I feel validated by that. Thank you. Recently, I've gotten into a show that aired several years ago. I'm actually surprised at how long ago it aired. But it's called Fringe. And Fringe is kind of like an updated X-Files type of show. But there was a scene that really stood out to me in a recent episode that I watched. And it was where one of the characters, called Peter, spoke about his father, Walter, who is an amazing scientist, but who also experiences mental illness. Peter said, "I always thought that what Walter went through, I only saw it from my own perspective, as something he did to us, my mother and me. It wasn't something that happened to him." Similarly, alcohol and substance use disorder sometimes creates the dynamic where all involved believe the other person is to blame for something that they may be struggling with. The person living with substance or alcohol use disorder blames their family or even themselves for some things related to their behaviors or other reactions. Or the family may blame their loved ones or even themselves for the things that happen. And so communication starts to break down as people focus on the other being a cause of their suffering, and forget that just like Peter with Walter, the other is also suffering, whether they're aware of it or not. Even if we're sympathetic to what the other person is going through, whether a family member or the person living with a substance or alcohol use disorder, the focus becomes the other is causing the problems. And we may struggle just as Peter did to see that the other is also struggling. Now, as human beings, one of our greatest gifts is the ability to problem solve. It can also be one of our greatest struggles too, because as quoted in the book, A Spirituality of Imperfection, it says, "We modern people are problem solvers, but the demand for answers crowds out patience, and perhaps especially patience with mystery, with that which we cannot control." When we see our loved ones with a problem, we try to problem solve it. We try to fix it for them. But this leads to further fractures in communication, and the connection that we may have had begins to deteriorate. And what's left is that place of estrangement and separation that leads us all to places where we simply cannot trust each other. And yet it began with something as simple as trying to help. trying to problem solve, as we focus on the other as opposed to how we may need to work on ourselves. A phrase that I came across some time ago is that the opposite of addiction is connection. I'll say that again. The opposite of addiction is connection. Connection comes in many forms. And it starts with us seeking to be as authentic as we can be in our awareness of self, in our honesty with others, and in our looking towards guidance from whatever that source of strength and hope we are seeking to build a relationship with is. So let's be clear. Reconciliation first starts with reconciling to ourselves, learning how to connect authentically to ourselves so that we can begin to work on connecting authentically to others. There are so many habits, behaviors, and values that can begin to be stripped away from us due to the substance or alcohol use disorder that we may be living with, or our loved one may be living with, that it becomes important for us then not so much to focus on the other, but to bring it back to ourselves. How do I reconcile with myself? How do we begin the sometimes difficult process of learning how to love and accept who we are, even those parts of ourselves that we might not love? Some who've heard me speak before have heard me say that even those parts of us that are in the past that we may wish to forget about are still parts of our story. Trying to forget about them leads us down the road of forgetting a big part of our life, a big part of our memories. As you've heard the quote say, if we forget the past, we're doomed to repeat it. So taking a focus on ourselves and learning where our growing areas are, not seeking to punish ourselves for not being perfect, that's a start. Another quote from The Spirituality of Imperfection reads, "When we accept ourselves in all our weakness, flaws, and failings, we can begin to fulfill an even more challenging responsibility, accepting the weakness, limitations, and mixed-upness of those we love and respect. Then, and only then, it seems, do we begin to accept the weakness, defects, and shortcomings of those we find it difficult to love." As we learn to allow ourselves to look at our own woundedness with honesty, kindness, and love, we will begin to recognize that the wounds of others are no different. And maybe we can begin to learn how to accept ourselves and accept our loved one or our family member or friend, wounds and all. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to like what that person may be doing, but when we begin to recognize that we all have imperfections. Once more, as the book I've been quoting says, imperfections are part of our truth as human beings. To deny our errors is to deny ourselves. For to be human is to be imperfect. To be human is to ask unanswerable questions, but to persist in asking them, to be broken and ache for wholeness, to hurt and to try and find a way to healing through the hurt. So we're not striving for perfection. We're striving for healing. And anyone who may have ever had thoughts about not feeling good enough, not being able to do enough, not being able to be enough, these thoughts push us away from that deeper connection to move towards healing those wounds and a reconciliation to a healthy sense of self, and in turn the start to reconcile with those around us, Through the honesty, authenticity, and humility, we learn from being curious about our own imperfections rather than being shamed by them. Now remember this, from the Judeo-Christian scripture, the name that God gave God's self was I am. And I am are two of the most important words that we can use to describe ourselves. Because everything that we say after I am becomes our reality. You may think or say, I am not good enough. I am not strong enough. I am a failure. Then you live into that which you say. You say, I am enough. I am strong, even if I don't always feel it. I am learning from the important lessons being presented to me. And your energy will shift and you begin to live into that which you say. And a side note, when it comes down to the word failure, failure is a really good acronym for found another important lesson upon reviewing experience. So as we begin the process of reconciling with ourselves, we may face some challenging thoughts related to what is healthy in our lives. Do we need to step away from relationships that are keeping us sick or causing us harm in some way? And you may ask, well, how is that reconciliation? But we need to recognize that not all relationships are going to be healthy, and those relationships may drag us away from that authentic self that we are seeking to become. It's important for us to remember that we become who we surround ourselves with. If you want to get healthy, regardless of whether you're a family member or a patient or alumni, we become who we surround ourselves with. If you want to seek towards becoming the most authentic person that you can be and seeking to live into healthy values, behaviors, and emotional well-being, then surround yourselves with people who are seeking the same goals and explore these together. So this is one reason why meetings exist, regardless of the meeting, whether AA, NA, SMART, Recovery Dharma, Phoenix Recovery, any other type of meetings or groups that are out there, or their equivalent for family members and friends. They exist so that you can find connection, community, and work on becoming the most authentic version of you that you can become, and surround yourself with people who want to live into similar values, behaviors, and emotional well-beings. Sometimes people may seek to avoid meetings. Why? Well, because they take time, they take work because you're tired or because of other reasons. But to remind you again, you become who you surround yourself with. If you isolate, you remain stuck. But if you're part of a community and you work on building those connections with the healthy people in that community, you'll have more of an opportunity to working on building your good health with them. Another reminder about meetings is that they're a helpful tool to get you back to living and embracing your life once more. You don't live your life to go to meetings. You go to meetings so that you can live your life. Going to meetings, building a social network through them, you can get people back to understanding who they are, learning how to have fun and begin to embrace life once more. Case in point, I remember some families once sharing that while their loved ones were in treatment, they recognized that not only were their loved ones safe, but they didn't have to sit at home anymore waiting by the phone for an inevitable phone call that something was wrong, or in their case, guard their house. They could go out for a meal with friends they had met as a result of going to Al-Anon or another support community. They began to take their life back as a result of meeting these folks. And it made it easier for them to talk about their loved ones with people who were in a similar situation. And they were able to talk about their own struggles with their loved one's substance use disorder and how it had impacted them and impacted their own behaviors. They found community in that social setting through going to the meetings that they went to. So to highlight that once more, meetings exist as much as for fellowship, community, and reconciliation as they do for working the steps, checking in, or any other reason. Now remember what I said earlier. The opposite of addiction is connection. And with that connection brings about reconciliation with self. And because we feel reconciled with ourselves, that helps us reconcile with others because we can be that more authentic self when we connect with them. And this brings about a healing as we allow ourselves to shine a light on the woundedness that we may be experiencing. And that in turn can teach us how to grow. Now finally, let us discuss reconciliation with that source of guidance in our lives. As we begin to understand the role that shame can play within us, it's important for us to reconcile, to remember even, that whatever that source of guidance that we are seeking to build a relationship with is something that always gives us a choice. It does not belittle us, it does not judge us, it does not seek to punish us. Because let's face it, we do a pretty good job of doing that ourselves, am I right? Right. When we search for healing by seeking to reconcile with that which we may have felt shame towards, for fear that it may judge us, hate us, or that we can never feel good enough based on what we've been told about it, I hope that we can remember that from another Judeo-Christian example, the story of Adam and Eve. Two people who were told consequences of a particular action. They did the action, they ate the fruit from that tree, and experienced shame. They hid from God. So they experienced consequences as their world started unraveling. But you know what? It would have been really easy in this case for God to say, bye, kick them out of paradise, bye, see you later, don't let the door hit you on the way out, I'll just be sitting here all in paradise, all by myself, and enjoying paradise while you're out there struggling. But you know what? God didn't do that. God left paradise with them. And their lives got harder as a result of their actions. But you know what? God was there every step of the way with them and accompanied them. God did not shame them in that process. God did not abandon them. But as they left paradise, so God left paradise with them and supported them every step of the way. So whatever that source of guidance is that you are seeking to explore or seeking to look to, seeking to build a relationship with it, try and build a relationship with it as openly as you can. Be open, honest. It doesn't matter what this source of guidance is, whether it's ethereal, such as God, spirit, energy, nature, universe, or even a deceased loved one, or whether it's more tangible, such as a support community, a set of disciplines, or simply the phrase, what is the next right thing to do? The spiritual energy that exists around all of these things already welcomes you, like the prodigal son. It wants to be reconciled with you. It wants you to allow yourself to remember that you do have a choice to do the best thing that you can for yourself so that you can live into becoming the most authentic you that you can be. It wants to meet you, imperfections and all. So tell it your story. Listen to where it may be speaking to you. Through nature, music, through other people, or through something else. Whatever you do know that whatever that source of guidance is for you, it does want something better for you. through work, through time. It wants you to move beyond that shame that tries to keep you separated from it, from others, and from yourself. Allow yourself to invite playfulness, curiosity, and wonder back in your life. It may have been a while, but allow yourself to open up and begin the process of releasing shame and begin a new relationship of finding joy in this next part of your story, as you will find reconciliation with the authentic connections that you are beginning to experience within yourself, the reconciliation you may begin to experience with others, and exploring the meaningful relationships with whatever is becoming that source of guidance and hope for you. Amen.